we all think that we're buying into different companies and buying different histories and spreading the business around. But really, these hundreds of millions of dollars just spent on watches every year are going into like 3 pockets, ultimately. It's crazy. What is up, Watch fam? I am Christian from Theo and Harris.
And I'm Anna from Theo and Harris.
And today we're going to be talking about conglomerates and watches.
Yeah.
Many people don't realize that watches, like other luxury goods, are really controlled by a few key players. So we're not just going to tell you who those key players are and what they own, but really why that happened and what it means to you as the consumer. But before we get into it, a quick wristwatch check. What are you wearing, Anna?
I am wearing a gorgeous rose gold UG pull router.
The watch is gorgeous.
It is beautiful. It's in perfect condition.
Yeah, basically.
It's so gorgeous.
That's in pink gold. Really, they were hardly made in pink gold.
Yeah.
And the case is super thick and sharp too. It's basically unpolished.
Yeah.
This is a very lucky find. I actually found it from not a dealer, but from like an owner, a collector, I believe in Spain. And when I was offered it, I was kind of like skeptical. Things are kind of too good to be true usually, and they are. But when the watch landed in my possession, I said, "Holy crap! Original crystal, original crown,
special. Yeah.
and special watch." Yep. I am wearing something very similar in the precious metal world, but very different. A Rolex reference 1803, date 8, with an early Buckley dial. Both of these watches are available in Theo and Harris Watch Shop.
Links are below.
I personally curated them both and have a closer look to the photos and the links below. Okay, let's get into it. Set the stage, Anna. What is a conglomerate, and name them?
So there are many in the watch world, but the 3 biggest players are Swatch Group, Richemont, and LVMH. And Richemont and Swatch really have the biggest bulk of watch brands. Swatch has 18, and I think Richemont has like over a dozen. The brands they have are like totally different. They don't focus on just like super luxury or dress or like just sport. They do both have like a variety, so we'll list them. But before we get into like who they own, how did all this come about?
Well, as many of you may know, in the early 1970s, the watch industry was broken. After the invention of the quartz watch by Seiko all the way in Japan, the Swiss watch industry was absolutely devastated, chopped down to a fraction of what it once was. Tens of thousands of people were unemployed. It was devastation. Not to mention that watchmaking is Switzerland's crown jewel. So really, watches were in a really bad place. Watch houses were going out. Some of the most famous and most revered watch brands like Agassiz at some point no longer existed. That's why we don't know the names of so many of the watch brands that were famous in the 50s and 60s today. So a gentleman by the name of Nicolas Hyek decided, well, we really aren't going to be able to survive on our own. For cash flow reasons, for so many reasons, these brands are going to start to die off. So our only chance at true survival, at preservation, and let's even talk about expansion or growth, is to band together. So he developed the Swatch Group, which does not just own the company Swatch.
Yeah, they own like 18 watch brands. Like Omega, Longines, Jacquardot, just to name a few.
It's really incredible. Like I said before, so many people think that they're buying competitors when they buy Omega versus Longines or Longines versus Hamilton or Breguet, but really, ultimately, this money is trickling into the same places, which raises some large questions about brands' integrity or are brands really what they were before they were bought up by Swatch Group? Do they have those same core values and what made them famous to begin with? Has that been retained, or has it been watered down and diluted? The second big brand that came out of it was Richemont. Richemont owns some other brands that really I think that I like more. Richemont owns Lange. Richemont owns Cartier, Jaeger-LeCoultre, Vacheron Constantin, Piaget, Panerai. Richemont is a powerhouse of more higher luxury brands.
Definitely.
I think that it's quite possible that Richemont has actually done a better job than Swatch at more curated watches. Swatch has some great brands, Glacé Original being one of their shining stars, but Richemont, really is the conglomerate that I would, if I was a candy store that I had to go take watches from,
of course,
that would be it. But there is something from a functional standpoint standpoint, from a business standpoint, that Swatch kicks Richemont's ass.
Well, Swatch brings in more money, I think.
They do, but what's really crazy is Swatch owns ETA. And so many of the world's watches, whether owned by Swatch or not, are powered by ETA movements. And that doesn't just go to benefit Swatch right now when a brand, like so many brands, Breitling, Bell & Ross, so many brands use ETA movements. It's innumerable brands use ETA movements.
Right.
But even in history, when people need to go back and service an ETA movement, eventually they're going to only be able to go through Swatch. So Swatch really, from a strategy standpoint, is remarkable.
I mean, you can get into so many brands even outside of the ones that you own, right, by having ETA.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, there's a third conglomerate, right? LVMH.
LVMH is definitely less like watch geeky. Their major brands are Bulgari, Hublot, Tag Heuer, which, you know, while they are big brands and super well known, I think they're less like geeky, like it's, you know.
Yeah, you can't compare Hublot to Jaeger-LeCoultre
or Longines.
or Longines, right?
Yeah.
The values, the intentions of the brands are entirely different. Longines is a brand that is famous or revered for their developments in movement architecture, not even just finishing. That's a real watch brand. Whereas Tag Heuer, who do make some interesting watches, some great watches, have made historically great watches, you can't put them on the same, can't put them on the same level.
Yeah.
Which is interesting that Swatch, Richemont, and LVMH, have built a different profile of their collection, and it's very interesting.
Yeah.
But now, the big question now is, what does this all mean? How much liberty do these brands have once they're acquired? Now, Richemont is different than LVMH, but let's say LVMH were to acquire a Richemont-type brand. What do I mean? If, let's say, Richemont were to acquire a true watchmaker's brand, a brand that is more online with Jaeger-LeCoultre, in that they have true dedication to the progression of movement architecture and new design and new complication, things like that, real watch geek stuff.
Right.
Would they allow them to be them, or would they make them an LVMH version of them? If LVMH bought JLC tomorrow, would they change? Would they change? Once you saw Jean-Claude Bivet come into LVMH, you saw a lot of similarity between them. Is that because Tag Heuer wanted to be more like Hublot, or because LVMH appointed, Jean-Claude Bivet? These are the interesting questions. Everyone knows that when you get involved in a big corporation, it's much harder to do things.
You go through a lot of
all these regulations,
right, exactly.
and it's just more difficult to be. There's no autonomy, but these companies are still, in a way, independent of each other. There's
Absolutely.
a common string, but they are still competitors. The president of Glashütte Original does not make money, when Blancpain makes money. The president is subject to being fired if his sales are poor. Made up of different people with different histories. Their messaging is different. Their executions are different. So no, I don't think it's like this big watch world conspiracy that's all controlled by a few people. They're trying to, through different mediums, through different voices, through different products, acquire larger market share. And they are factually competitors.
Something that allows them even to focus on building is that being part of that, I'm sure they have access to resources.
When you get bought up by a massive company, your resources are exponentially larger.
Yeah.
I definitely think that it's more difficult to be creative sometimes. I think it's definitely more difficult, factually. It's harder to be you,
Right.
when you now have to report to someone else, and when there's a second opinion involved. It's harder to be that brand.
Right.
Omega is a great example. It's a Swatch Group company that we are very familiar with pre-Swatch Group. Right? We know Omega from the 50s and the 60s. The Theo and Harris watch shop is constantly stocked with vintage Seamasters and Geneves and things like that. And their profile of watches then is very different than their profile of watches now. Omega had a much greater focus on dress watches, right? Their profile was different, and their Speedmaster has remained, but has had very little evolution.
Yeah.
Right? So you wonder, who did that? Was it Omega that said, our collection's a little bit too dressy for the modern world. Let's sport it up, and also let's basically build our entire collection around the Speedmaster? Or was it Swatch Group putting pressure? You don't really know.
Right, there's no way to tell.
There's really no way to tell. But it's interesting to look at turning points in brand histories. It's the bad conglomerates that kill these brands, that kill their individuality. No, it's not. I'm sure there are instances in which the owners, the Swatch Groups, the Richemonts, the LVMHs, I'm sure there are instances in which they stifle creativity in exchange for, long-term financial profitability or stability. But still, you can't just blame them. You know?
Because ultimately, I think that people that you learn how to work within the system that you're put in, right? And not every brand is being, stifled the way that people might argue Omega is, Like, I think Lange is a good example. Lange is developing and delivering some of the best quality, best design. Yeah. They're always forward thinking. They're always, perfecting even to a higher degree. Yeah. They have learned to work within the Richemont, system. Yeah. And so I think it really allows you to shine if you have the capacity.
You're 100% right. It just comes down to, is your company vision aligned with the vision, of your acquirer? Mm-hmm. That's, if you have differing vision, then the company will change because they're your boss. Mm-hmm. If you have the same vision, you will just be you on steroids. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with every company. And I'm sure that so many of our followers out there, so many of our audience members, have bought and sold companies and have experienced this on a smaller or maybe even bigger level. It's a weird thing to think about because your vision for the company is not as clear or easy to see as, well, what is my valuation? I think it's very helpful and very interesting for us to know this. If you guys enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like it and subscribe to our channel at Theo and Harris. And if you want to enter our Teenage giveaway to win the Martinero Edgemere, a beautiful independent brand, 40 millimeters automatic, power reserve, to $600 and something watch that we are giving away for free, subscribe to our channel and enter your name and your email, very simple, into the form linked in the description. Thanks all so much, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for watching.